The transport shuttle descended through the atmospheric shielding of Calvareth 9 with a shudder that rattled the teeth in Rencade's jaw. He did not grip the safety restraints. Instead, he watched the view screen as the clouds of sulfur and ionization parted to reveal the surface below. It was a bruised purple and deep emerald tangle of vegetation, a jungle so dense it looked like a single living organism wrapped around the moon's crust. Dr. Rencade adjusted the collar of his field jacket. He was a man composed of hard angles and scar tissue, his history written on his skin in a language of burns and jagged lines. The academic community back on Earth called him the foremost expert on xenobiological predatory behaviors. But the soldiers he used to command in the border skirmishes of the Outer Rim just called him the Survivor. He had spent the first half of his life killing monsters and the second half trying to understand them. The pilot's voice crackled over the intercom, announcing their arrival at the Apex Research Facility. The shuttle touched down on a landing pad suspended high above the canopy by grav tethers. As the hydraulic ramp hissed open, the air hit Ren like a physical blow. It was thick, humid, and smelled of wet earth, ozone, and something metallic, like blood drying on hot copper. Ren grabbed his duffel bag and stepped out into the sweltering heat. The facility was a gleaming monolith of white plasteel and glass, starkly out of place against the wild, chaotic jungle surrounding it. A delegation waited for him at the end of the platform. At the center stood a woman who made the humidity seem to vanish, replaced by a sudden, sharp clarity. It was Princess Zariah of House Calvareth. Ren had seen holograms of her during the briefing, but the digital renderings did not do justice to the reality. She was tall, towering over the human scientists flanking her, with a lithe, powerful build that suggested concealed strength rather than delicate royalty. Her skin was opalescent, shimmering with a faint pearly iridescence that seemed to catch the ambient light and hold it. Her eyes were the most striking feature, large, feline, and possessing vertical slit pupils that tracked Ren's movement with predatory precision. Ren stopped 3 paces from her. He did not bow. He offered a nod, the kind one soldier gives another before a patrol. Princess Zariah tilted her head, her long braided hair shifting over her shoulder like a dark river. She wore a structural tunic of silver and deep blue that left her arms bare, revealing faint, intricate patterns etched into her skin. "Dr. Cade," she said. Her voice was a low contralto, vibrating with a resonance that Ren felt in his chest. "You move quietly for a man carrying so much heavy baggage." Ren raised an eyebrow. "My baggage is mostly equipment, Your Highness. And I learned a long time ago that loud footsteps attract things you do not want to see." Zariah smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. Her gaze remained analytical, dissecting him. "We shall see. Welcome to Calvareth 9. My father, the king, sends his regards, though he thinks this project is a waste of credits. I, however, have read your dossier 3 times. Ren shifted his weight. He was used to being studied, but usually by review boards or tactical assessment officers, not alien royalty with eyes like a jungle cat. "And what did the dossier tell you? That I am a washed-up soldier playing scientist?" "It told me that you are the only human expert who studies predators not to control them, but to respect them," Zariah said, stepping closer. The distance between them closed, and Ren caught her scent. It was not perfume. It was something clean and sharp, like rain on stone. "You possess a unique philosophy, Doctor. You believe that the hunter is defined by the prey." "It is a biological fact," Ren replied, keeping his voice level. "Evolution drives an arms race. The predator gets faster. The prey gets smarter. They create each other." Zariah hummed, a sound that was almost a purr. Indeed, humans are fascinating in that regard. You are the only species in the Galactic Alliance that hunted for thrill and poetry long after you stopped needing to hunt for food. You romanticized the kill. Ren felt a prickle of irritation mixed with something else, curiosity. We also romanticized survival. There is a difference. Come, Zaraya said, turning on her heel with a fluidity that made the human aides look clumsy. Let me show you what we have built. Tell me if it lives up to your poetry. The interior of the Apex Research Facility was a marvel of engineering. The corridors were wide, cool, and lined with high-tensile transparent aluminum that looked out into vast simulated biomes. As they walked, Zaraya dismissed her entourage with a flick of her hand, leaving only Ren to walk beside her. The silence between them was heavy, charged with an unspoken assessment. Ren watched her peripheral vision. She walked with the balls of her feet striking first, a stealth gait, unusual for someone raised in a palace. They stopped before a massive viewing window looking into a recreation of a high-gravity jagged tundra. Inside, something massive moved against the gray rocks. It was a quadruped, heavy set with armored plating along its spine and a jaw that unhinged to reveal rows of serrated teeth. The Vorax Prime, Zaraya said softly, extinct on its homeworld for 4,000 years. We reconstructed its genetic sequence from fossilized marrow found in the northern ice caps. Ren stepped closer to the glass. The creature huffed, vapor rising from its nostrils. It turned its massive head toward them, its black eyes fixating on Ren. Even through the reinforced barrier, Ren felt the ancient reptilian weight of that stare. It looks healthy, Ren observed, his professional detachment sliding into place. Muscle density is high. How are you managing the aggression levels? A predator this old, with no natural enemies, should be tearing this enclosure apart trying to find a boundary. We utilize a neuro-dampening field during the night cycle to lower their cortisol levels, Zaraya explained, her reflection ghosting over the glass next to his. And we feed them synthesized meat that contains mild sedatives. Ren frowned. Sedatives? That alters the data. If you want to study natural predatory behaviors, you cannot drug them. You are studying sleepy monsters, not real ones. Zaraya turned to him, her expression unreadable. Safety is a priority for the Alliance investors. They want to see the beasts. Ren, not the bloodshed. Ren looked back at the Vorax. It paced the perimeter, its claws scraping deep gouges into the synthetic rock. That creature does not want to be safe, Highness. It wants to hunt. You can reconstruct the body, but you cannot reconstruct the context. Without the hunt, it is just a prisoner. Like us? Zaraya asked. Ren looked at her sharply. The question was thrown out casually, but it landed with precision. I am here to do a job, Ren said, not to discuss philosophy. Zaraya laughed softly, the sound echoing in the sterile corridor. You are rigid, Doctor. I expected more fluidity from a survivalist. Come, I want to show you the avian sector. I believe you have a fondness for the Terran raptors of your own prehistory. They continued the tour, moving deeper into the complex. The facility housed horrors and wonders in equal measure. There were serpent-like leviathans from the ocean moons of Hydros, kept in pressurized tanks that spanned 10 stories. There were insectoid swarm hunters from the hive worlds, chittering behind magnetic fields. In the Terran sector, Ren found himself looking at a genetic approximation of a saber-toothed cat. It was larger than the fossil record suggested, its muscles rippling under tawny fur. We had to fill the gaps in the DNA with local feline analogs, Zaraya admitted, standing close enough that her arm brushed his. The result is more robust than the original Earth species. Ren narrowed his eyes. He looked at the biometric readout on the holographic display next to the glass. The metabolic rate was off. The adrenaline spikes were constant. "This animal is in a state of perpetual fight or flight," Ren murmured, tapping the glass. "Look at the pupil dilation. It is terrifying, or it is angry. Why is serotonin production so low?" Dr. Haldren, the sector head, hurried over, wiping sweat from his balding forehead with a handkerchief. He was a nervous man, his eyes darting between Ren and the princess. Dr. Cade," Haldren stammered. "The genetic splicing caused some unexpected hormonal imbalances. We are working on correcting it. The aggressive tendencies are a side effect." Ren looked at Haldren, really looked at him. The man smelled of fear. Not the respect fear one has for a dangerous animal, but the guilt fear of a man hiding something. "Unexpected?" Ren repeated. "You spliced the DNA with a Calvarethian Night Stalker, didn't you? That is the only local analog that matches this muscle density." Haldren flinched. Zariah intervened smoothly. "We used what was available. Doctor, do not interrogate my staff. We invited you here to help us understand the behavior, not to critique the engineering." Ren turned his gaze to Zariah. The flirty, philosophical air was gone, replaced by a wall of royal ice. But beneath the ice, Ren saw something else. She was watching Haldren with a sharpness that suggested she was not protecting him, but silencing him. "If you use Night Stalker DNA," Ren said, lowering his voice, "you are introducing a pack-hunting instinct into a solitary predator. You are confusing its brain. It doesn't know if it should kill alone or wait for a signal." "Then teach us how to fix it," Zariah said, her voice challenging. "Or are you only good at analyzing the dead?" The tour ended shortly after. Ren was shown to his quarters, a suite that was too large and too comfortable for a man used to sleeping in hammocks or barracks. He threw his bag on the bed and paced the room. Something was wrong. The data streams on the saber-tooth were inconsistent. The scientists were too jumpy. And Princess Zariah? She was a puzzle he could not quite fit together. She spoke of poetry and hunting, but she funded a lab that drugged its subjects. She seemed to possess a reverence for the wild, yet she presided over a prison. Ren waited until the facility's artificial day cycle transitioned to night. The lights in the corridors dimmed to a low amber, mimicking the twilight of the moon outside. He changed into dark tactical fatigues and soft-soled boots. He wasn't on a mission, but old habits died hard. He needed to walk the perimeter. He needed to see what the facility looked like when the performative science stopped. He slipped out of his quarters, bypassing the main elevators and taking a service stairwell down to the lower levels. The air here was cooler, humming with the vibration of the massive power generators that kept the containment fields active. Ren moved through the shadows, avoiding the security patrols with practiced ease. He wasn't hiding. Technically, he had clearance, but he didn't want to answer questions. He found himself near the maintenance access for Sector 7. On the official map, Sector 7 was storage, but as Ren approached, he saw a heavy blast door guarded by 2 armed sentries wearing full combat armor, not the light security uniforms of the upper levels. Ren hugged the wall, blending into the darkness behind a stack of supply crates. He watched. A technician swiped a keycard, and the blast door hissed open for a fraction of a second. Inside, Ren caught a glimpse of red emergency lighting and heard a sound that made the hair on his arms stand up. It was a screech, high-pitched, psychic, and terrifyingly familiar. It sounded like a banshee wraith, a creature that had been banned from resurrection by the Galactic Council due to its uncontrollable psionic abilities. The door slammed shut. Ren exhaled slowly. Why would they have a banshee wraith? That wasn't research, that was weapons development. Dr. Cade. The voice came from right beside his ear. Ren spun around, his hand instinctively going to the small stun baton concealed at his belt, but he stopped himself halfway. Ziraya was leaning against the wall less than 2 feet away. He hadn't heard her. He hadn't smelled her. She had simply materialized from the dark. She was barefoot. Her feet were archless and long, designed for gripping. She had shed the structural tunic for a flowing robe of sheer dark fabric that floated around her like smoke. In the dim light, her skin glowed with a faint rhythmic luminescence, pulsing in time with her heartbeat. "You are wandering," she said. Her eyes were wide, the pupils dilated to take in the low light. "I couldn't sleep," Ren said, his heart rate normalizing through sheer force of will. "I wanted to see the facility at night. Animals behave differently when the sun goes down." "So do people," Ziraya murmured. She looked past him, toward the guarded door of Sector 7. "You found the storage wing. Nothing interesting there, just failed experiments awaiting incineration." Ren doubted that. The screech he had heard was very much alive, but he knew better than to push her now. He was on her turf, and she had just proven she could sneak up on him. "Is that where you keep the mistakes?" Ren asked. "We all have a place where we keep our mistakes." "Doctor, where do you keep yours?" "In that bottle of synthetic whiskey I saw in your bag, or in the nightmares that make you pace your room at 3 in the morning." Ren stepped away from the wall, creating a polite distance. "You are very observant. I told you I studied you." She gestured toward a large viewing balcony at the end of the hall. "Come. The twin moons are reaching their zenith. It is the only thing on this rock worth seeing." Ren followed her. He had no choice. The balcony was open to the air, protected only by an energy shield that kept the insects out but let the humidity in. Above them, the 2 moons of Calvareth hung heavy in the sky, one pale white, the other a deep, bruising red. The jungle below was a chorus of chirps, roars, and rustles. Ziraya walked to the edge and leaned against the railing, looking out. The wind whipped her dark robes around her legs. "On Earth," she began, her voice soft. "Do your predators mate for life?" Ren blinked at the sudden shift in topic. "Some wolves, mostly. Most others are solitary. They come together only when the biological imperative demands it. Then they part ways." "And the humans?" she asked, turning to face him. Ren leaned against the railing, keeping his eyes on the jungle. "We are complicated. We mate for life, for a night, for political gain, for loneliness. We don't have a set pattern." Ziraya stepped closer. Her bioluminescence flared slightly, a soft blue light washing over her collarbones. "My species is intense. We are descendants of apex predators, just like the things in those cages. For us, intimacy is not soft. It is a challenge, a proof of worth." She reached out, her long fingers hovering inches from Ren's arm. She did not touch him, but he could feel the heat radiating from her skin. "Why are you telling me this, Highness?" Ren asked, his voice rougher than he intended. "Because you are the first male I have met in a decade who does not look at me with fear or greed," Ziraya said. She closed the distance. She was tall enough that she looked him directly in the eye. "You look at me with caution, like I am a bomb that might go off." Ren held his ground. He could smell the ozone scent of her again, stronger now, mixed with something muskier. Pheromones, or just the natural scent of an alien species in its prime? "You are dangerous," Ren said quietly. "I would be a fool not to be cautious." Ziraya laughed, A low, throaty sound. Dangerous. Yes. But tell me, Ren, what is it like to be feared and desired at the same time? The question hung in the humid air. Ren looked at her, the alien contours of her face, the hunger in her strange vertical eyes, the glowing patterns on her skin. He felt a pull, a deep, magnetic drag in his gut. It was the same feeling he got right before a dropship bay opened, the anticipation of the fall. He wanted to touch her. He wanted to trace the lines of light on her skin and see if they burned. But the soldier in him screamed a warning. She was distracting him. She had caught him near Sector 7, and now she was burying that discovery under layers of sexual confusion. It is exhausting, Ren said finally. Being feared means you are never truly safe, and being desired usually means someone wants to take something from you. Ziraya's expression faltered for a microsecond, a flicker of vulnerability breaking through the royal mask. Or perhaps, she whispered, it means they want to give you something. She reached up and brushed her thumb against the scar on his jawline. Her skin was incredibly smooth but hot, fever hot. Ren's breath hitched. He caught her wrist. His grip was firm, stopping her hand. Ziraya, he warned. She looked down at his hand holding her wrist, then back up at his eyes. She did not pull away. She leaned in, her lips inches from his ear. You are resisting, she murmured. Good. Surrender is boring. I prefer a struggle. Ren released her wrist and took a step back. He needed space. He needed to think. This was a game, and he did not know the rules. I should go back to my quarters. Ren said, we have the tracking exercise at 0600. Ziraya watched him, her chest rising and falling with a rhythm that seemed synchronized with the jungle sounds below. She looked disappointed, but also amused. The predator had let the prey go. For now. Sleep well. Dr. Cade, she said, turning back to the view of the moons. Ren turned and walked toward the door. He felt her eyes on his back, heavy and physical. He reached the threshold of the corridor when her voice stopped him one last time. Ren? He paused, looking back over his shoulder. She was silhouetted against the red moon, a figure of myth and danger. Can I call the human who hunted them? She asked. Ren frowned, confused by the phrasing. Call who? She smiled. A secret, dangerous thing? Can I call the human who hunted them? She repeated, the words hanging in the air like a riddle he wasn't meant to solve yet. Ren didn't answer. He turned and walked into the cool, sterile darkness of the corridor, leaving the heat and the princess behind. But as he walked, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had just stepped out of the cage and into the wild. The morning sun of Calvareth 9 was not a singular entity, but a binary oppression. The primary star, a bloated orange giant, beat down on the jungle canopy with a heaviness that felt physical, while its smaller white dwarf companion sliced through the leaves with blinding, focused intensity. Ren Cade wiped sweat from his brow, the moisture instantly replaced by the humid air. He was 3 hours into a predator tracking exercise in Sector 4. A vast, enclosed biodome that replicated the dense rainforests of the moon's equatorial belt. He was accompanied by a squad of Calvarethian game wardens, tall, silent figures clad in reactive camouflage armor that shifted color to match the foliage. The target was a pack of reconstructed pack hunters, genetically modeled after the Alpha Draco raptors of the Proxima Centauri system. They were supposed to be instinct-driven beasts, resurrected from fossilized amber and spliced with local lizard DNA. They were supposed to be animals. Ren crouched low, examining a broken fern frond. The break was clean, snapped with precision, not trampled. He touched the mud. No tracks. Stop, Wren signaled with a raised fist. The lead warden, a scarred female named Captain Vok, paused. What is it? Dr. Cade? The bioscanners show the pack is 2 kilometers north. Wren shook his head slowly. Your scanners are lying. Or rather, they are being fed what they want to see. He pointed to a cluster of sensor nodes mounted on a tree trunk nearby. The casing had been pried open, the delicate optical wiring severed. It had not been chewed. It had been clawed, yes. But with a specific intent. The wires were not ripped out in a frenzy. They were cut at the power junction. Animals do not sabotage surveillance, Wren said, his voice low. They run or they fight. They do not blind the enemy. Vok stepped closer, her yellow eyes narrowing. The Alpha Draco were known for problem-solving capabilities. Problem-solving is opening a door handle, Wren corrected. This is tactical suppression. They are flanking us. As if punctuating his sentence, a screech tore through the humid air, not from the north, where the scanners indicated, but from directly behind them. The ambush was executed with military precision. 3 raptors, their scales a mottled gray-green that rendered them nearly invisible, dropped from the canopy. They did not roar. They struck in silence. Wren rolled instinctively, his shoulder slamming into the wet earth as a set of sickle claws slashed the air where his head had been a second before. The lead warden shouted a command, raising her stun rifle. But the raptors were fast, impossibly fast. They moved not like wild beasts protecting territory, but like a strike team clearing a room. One raptor slammed into Vok, knocking the rifle from her grip. Another circled the perimeter, chuffing to drive the other wardens into a tight cluster. Wren scrambled to his feet, drawing his own stun baton. The raptor facing him hissed, its feathers raising along its neck. Wren locked eyes with it. There was no panic in the creature's gaze, only a cold, calculating intelligence. It feinted left, then lunged right. Wren sidestepped, swinging the baton in a tight arc. The electricity crackled, connecting with the beast's flank. The raptor yelped, a high-pitched sound, and scrambled back. But it did not flee. It regrouped. The creatures looked at each other, communicating with a series of low clicks, then simultaneously retreated into the dense undergrowth, vanishing as quickly as they had appeared. The wardens stood shaken, weapons raised at the empty jungle. Wren stared into the shadows, his heart hammering against his ribs. Those things did not just hunt. They tested our defenses. And when they found we were armed, they withdrew to reassess. That is not predation. That is reconnaissance. Later that afternoon, the adrenaline had faded into a dull ache in Wren's muscles. He sat across from Princess Zaraya on a private terrace overlooking the hydroponic gardens. The table was set with an array of crystal dishes that refracted the sunlight into rainbows across the white tablecloth. Wren poked at his meal, a bowl of mixed greens, grown in the station's agriculture wing. You look suspicious of the vegetation, Doctor, Zaraya observed. She was reclining in a chair that looked more like a throne, holding a goblet of viscous, shimmering liquid. I am wondering if it is going to try and flank me, Wren muttered, stabbing a leaf of spinach. After this morning, I do not trust anything on this moon. Zaraya laughed, a sound like wind chimes in a storm. You eat dead leaves. It is a charming human habit. Grazing, like a herbivore. It is called salad, highness. And on Earth, we consider it healthy. What are you drinking? It looks like engine coolant. Zaraya swirled the liquid. It is nectar from the moon orchids, fermented with diamond dust. It sharpens the senses and hardens the enamel of the teeth. Wren watched her take a sip. Diamond dust, of course. Because regular wine is too soft for royalty? Because we are hard people. Wren, we consume the earth to become strong like it. Ren chewed his salad, watching her over the rim of the bowl. The banter was light, but the tension from the morning's exercise lingered in his mind. The raptors were coordinated, Ren said, dropping the humor. Too coordinated. They cut the sensor wires. Zariah, animals do not understand electronics. Zariah lowered her goblet. Her expression shifted, the amusement draining away to reveal a guarded stillness. The Alpha Draco were highly intelligent. That is why we resurrected them. Intelligence is one thing. Military tactics are another. Someone is teaching them, or someone engineered them to know it. Zariah looked away, staring out at the gardens where bioluminescent vines curled around silver trellises. There are anomalies in the genetic memory transfer. We are investigating it. Ren leaned forward. That is a polite way of saying you have lost control of the experiment. Zariah turned her gaze back to him. For a moment, the vertical pupils of her eyes dilated, swallowing the gold iris. Do not mistake curiosity for control. Ren, we are all experimenting here, even you. Before Ren could press her further, a chime sounded on her wrist communication band. She glanced at it and sighed, the regal mask slipping back into place. I have a council meeting, but I promise to show you the outer perimeter of Sector 9. The jungle there is untamed, not simulated. It is beautiful, in a deadly sort of way. I will manage, Ren said. No. Zariah stood, her silver tunic flowing around her like liquid metal. You will not manage. A gloom spider will eat you. I will escort you. The outer perimeter was a raw wound in the jungle, a slice of land where the facility's sterile control met the chaotic violence of Calvareth 9's natural ecosystem. They walked along a suspended walkway, 30 feet above the fern floor. The air here was different, wilder, filled with the screams of unseen things and the heavy rot of decomposition. Ren walked a pace behind Zariah. He watched the way she moved. She belonged here. He belonged. The facility was a cage for her as much as it was for the animals. Out here, with the wind whipping her hair and the humidity slicking her skin, she looked powerful. They stopped near a dense thicket of blue-bark trees. This is where we found the fossil of the six-eyed tiger, Zariah said, pointing down into the gloom. The locals call it the hexapanther. It was the apex predator of this moon before the atmosphere shifted 10,000 years ago. Ren leaned over the railing. And you brought it back? We tried, Zariah said softly. But the genome was fractured. A rustle in the canopy above them cut her off. It was not the wind. It was heavy, displacing the air with a deep, resonant thrum. Ren spun around, his hand going to his holster, but he was too slow. From the branches above, a nightmare descended. It was massive, easily 400 pounds of muscle and chitinous plating. It had the feline grace of a tiger, but its head was a cluster of sensory terrors. 6 eyes, arranged in 2 triangular clusters, burned with a malevolent violet light. Its jaw was a mandible hybrid, capable of crushing bone like glass. The hexapanther landed on the walkway with a metallic clang that shook the entire structure. Ren shouted, shoving Zariah behind him. He drew his stun pistol and fired. The blue bolt of energy struck the beast in the shoulder, but it simply absorbed the shock, shaking its massive head. It roared, a sound that was less a noise and more a physical vibration that rattled Ren's teeth. It swiped a massive paw. Ren ducked, but the claws caught the edge of his tactical vest, ripping through the Kevlar and sending him spinning across the metal grating. He slammed into the railing, the breath driven from his lungs. The beast advanced, saliva dripping from its mandibles. It was going to kill him. It wasn't playing and it wasn't tested. It was feeding. Ren scrambled backward, fumbling for his weapon. but it had skittered over the edge. He braced himself, reaching for the survival knife in his boot. It was a toothpick against a tank, but it was all he had. Suddenly, Zaraya stepped between them. She did not have a weapon. She did not scream. She raised her left arm, pulling back the sleeve of her tunic to reveal a sleek, matte black bracer clamped around her forearm. It didn't look like any scientific instrument Ren had seen in the facility. It looked like war tech. She clenched her fist. A high-frequency distortion rippled through the air. It was silent to human ears, but Ren felt it, a wave of nausea that hit his inner ear like a hammer. The hexapanther shrieked. It thrashed wildly, clawing at its own head as if invisible bees were stinging its brain. The violet light in its eyes flickered and died. The massive beast convulsed once, then collapsed onto the walkway, unconscious or dead. Silence rushed back into the jungle, heavy and suffocating. Ren sat up, gasping for air, clutching his bruised ribs. He stared at the beast, then at Zaraya. She was breathing hard, her skin glowing with a fierce, pulsing blue light that faded slowly as she lowered her arm. She tapped the bracer, and it retracted into a thin, innocuous bracelet. Ren pulled himself to his feet, wincing. That, he wheezed, was not a standard-issue tranquilizer. Zaraya turned to him. Her eyes were wide, the adrenaline clearly coursing through her. "Are you injured?" Ren ignored the question. That was a sonic neurodisruptor, military grade, restricted by the Galactic Alliance Treaty of System 7. Why does a xenobiologist princess have illegal siege weaponry on her wrist? Zaraya stepped toward him, checking his torn vest with trembling hands. "Because, Ren, this moon is full of things that do not care about treaties. And because I told you I am not just a scholar." Ren caught her hand. His grip was firm. "Who are you really, Zaraya, and what are you building here, that beast?" It didn't fear the stun bolt. It was engineered to resist energy weapons. Zaraya pulled her hand away gently. "I saved your life. Is that not enough for one afternoon?" She turned and began walking back toward the facility, her posture rigid. "Come. We need to treat your ribs, and I need a drink that does not taste like glass." That night, the humidity of the day gave way to a stifling, heavy heat. Ren lay in his quarters, staring at the ceiling. His ribs were taped, and he had swallowed 2 painkillers, but his mind refused to settle. The image of the hexapanther collapsing under the silent wave of Zaraya's tech played on a loop in his brain. The door chime rang. Ren sat up, swinging his legs over the edge of the bed. "Enter." The door slid open, and Zaraya stepped inside. She was not wearing the structural tunic of the day, nor the robes of the previous night. She wore a ceremonial cloak of deep velvet, clasped at the neck with a single obsidian stone. Beneath it, she appeared to be wearing nothing. Her feet were bare against the cold metal floor. Ren stood up slowly. "Highness, it is late." "I could not sleep," she said. The lie was obvious, but the vulnerability in her voice was real. She walked into the room, the cloak trailing behind her like a shadow. "I kept seeing the beast. I kept seeing you on the ground." "I've been on the ground before," Ren said, leaning against his desk to steady himself. "It's part of the job." Zaraya stopped in the center of the room. The lights were dim to night cycle, casting long shadows. In the darkness, Ren could see the bioluminescence of her skin more clearly now. It wasn't just a flat glow. It was a complex map of swirling patterns, concentrated around her throat and chest. It pulsed with a soft, rhythmic amber light. She looked at him, her feline eyes searching his face. "In my world, when 2 hunters survive a kill together, they share a bond. It is..." A physiological necessity. To ground the adrenaline. Ren crossed his arms, though his heart rate had kicked up a notch. We didn't kill it. You knocked it out with a magic bracelet. Zariah smiled, a sad, fleeting expression. You are always so technical. She undid the clasp of the cloak. It slid from her shoulders, pooling on the floor. Ren's breath caught in his throat. She was terrifyingly beautiful. Her body was a masterpiece of alien evolution, long limbs, sleek muscle, and skin that seemed to be made of moonlight and pearl. But it was the light that captivated him. The amber glow intensified as she looked at him, shifting to a flushed violet across her collarbones. She was not just naked. She was broadcasting her emotions in a language of light. I have studied humans, Zariah whispered, stepping closer. I have read your literature, your biology. But I do not understand your loneliness. You hold yourself apart, Ren, like a monk or a prisoner. Ren felt the magnetic pull again, stronger this time. It was dangerous. It was a breach of every protocol, professional and military. She was the subject, the funder, the royalty. He was the hired help. I am not a prisoner, Ren said, his voice rasping. I am just careful. Zariah reached out, placing her hand on his chest, directly over his heart. Her palm was hot, searingly so. Careful men do not come to moons full of monsters. Ren covered her hand with his. Her skin felt different than human skin, smoother, denser, vibrating with a faint electric hum. What do you want? Zariah, he asked. She looked up at him, her eyes wide and unguarded. I do not want to be royalty tonight. I do not want to be a conspirator or a scientist. I want to be a female longing to learn what hunger means. Not the hunger for food. The other kind. Ren groaned low in his throat. He should push her away. He should tell her to leave. But the isolation of the station, the brush with death in the jungle, and the sheer, overwhelming presence of her broke his resolve. He lowered his head and kissed her. It was not a tentative, exploratory kiss. It was a collision. Her lips tasted of the sweet, metallic orchid nectar. She made a sound that was half purr, half gasp, and pressed her body against his. The sensation was overwhelming, where her skin touched his. Ren felt a phantom heat, a tingling that went deeper than the nerves. She was bioelectric. Ren wrapped his arms around her waist, lifting her slightly. She wrapped her legs around him, light and strong. They moved toward the bed, a tangle of limbs and disparate species trying to find a common language. The intimacy was fierce, driven by the day's violence. Ren wrestled with the taboo of it, the strangeness of her anatomy, the way her spine arched with a flexibility no human possessed, the way her skin flared with bright, blinding white light when he touched the sensitive nerve clusters at the base of her neck. It was a shedding of armor. For a few hours, Ren wasn't the survivor and she wasn't the princess. They were just two living things in the dark, proving they were still alive. Later, the room was silent save for the hum of the air recyclers. Zariah lay curled against Ren's side, the sheet pulled up to her waist. The bioluminescence on her skin had dimmed to a contented soft blue. Ren looked at his own arm, where she had gripped him during the height of their passion. There were faint, glowing handprints on his skin. They were fading, but they pulsed in the dark. Infrared markers. Ren realized. Her skin secretes a thermal residue. He traced the mark. It was beautiful, and it was branded. Zariah stirred, her eyes fluttering open. She looked at him, and for a moment, she looked young, burdened by something heavier than a crown. Ren, she whispered. Yeah? The predators, the ones in the jungle. We did not just revive them. Ren stiffened. He knew this was coming. He had sensed the lie in the garden. What did you do, Zariah? She sat up, pulling the sheet around her. We tried to improve them. My father, he believes the Alliance is weak. He wanted guardians. But the genetic coding, it unlocked things we did not expect. Aggression. Telepathy. Telepathy? Ren sat up, the soldier snapping back into control. That explains the coordination. You gave raptors a hive mind? We thought we could control it, she said, her voice trembling. We were wrong. Ren got out of bed, reaching for his pants. He needed to think. He needed air. This wasn't just a bad experiment. This was a galactic crime. I need to go for a walk, Ren said abruptly. Ren, Zariah reached for him, but he pulled away. I need to process this. Zariah, stay here. He dressed quickly and exited the room, leaving her sitting in the center of the bed, glowing with the pale blue light of regret. The corridor was empty. Ren walked fast, his boots echoing on the metal. He needed to get to the comms array. He needed to send a message to Earth. If they were breeding telepathic war beasts, the Alliance had to know. He turned the corner toward the elevator bank. A soft whirring sound stopped him. Ren froze. It was the sound of a servo motor, high-pitched and steady. He turned slowly. Hovering at the end of the hall was a sphere, no larger than a melon, chrome and sleek. A single red eye glowed in its center, a standard security drone. Identify yourself, Ren said, holding up his clearance badge. Dr. Ren Cade, clearance level 4. The drone did not respond. The red eye cycled to white. Panels on its side slid open, revealing the twin barrels of micro-pulse repeaters. Ren didn't wait. He threw himself through the open door of a maintenance closet just as the corridor erupted in laser fire. The air sizzled as superheated plasma scorched the metal wall where he had been standing. Ren scrambled back, kicking the door shut and locking it. A second later, the door shuddered as a heavy impact dented the metal. It wasn't trying to arrest him, it was trying to liquidate him. Ren looked around the closet. Mops, buckets, a fire extinguisher. He grabbed the extinguisher. He waited. The door hissed as the drone began to burn through the lock. Sparks showered the room. Ren timed it. 1 second, 2 seconds. The lock gave way. The drone pushed the door open, floating into the small space. Ren swung the extinguisher with every ounce of strength he possessed. The heavy metal canister connected with the drone's sensory eye with a sickening crunch of glass and circuitry. The drone wobbled, firing a wild shot into the ceiling. Ren swung again, bringing the canister down on the anti-grav unit. The drone sparked and crashed to the floor, twitching. Ren stomped on the central processor for good measure. He stood there, panting in the smell of ozone and burnt plastic. The door to the closet opened behind him. Ren spun, raising the dented extinguisher. It was Zariah. She was dressed in her tunic again, breathless, her eyes wild. She looked at the smashed drone, then at Ren. I didn't send it, she said quickly, holding up her hands. Ren, I swear by the moons, I didn't send it. Ren lowered the weapon slowly. Someone did. That thing was programmed for lethal force. Someone knows I'm asking questions. Zariah stepped into the closet, closing the door behind her. Her face was grim. The soft lover from an hour ago replaced by the cold princess. My brother, she said quietly. He commands the security grid. He knew we were in the jungle. He knows you saw the hexapanther. Ren dropped the extinguisher. So, I'm at a loose end. Zariah looked at him, her eyes fierce. You are not a loose end. You are a target. She reached out, touching the bruise forming on his arm where he had hit the wall. Ren, she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. You were right. The gaps in the data. the nervous scientists, the weaponized tech. Ren met her gaze. "This is no longer a study," she said. "This is a battlefield with polite names. They aren't just resurrecting the past. Ren, they are building an army, and they are going to kill anyone who tries to stop the production line." Ren looked at the broken drone, then back at the alien princess who had just shared his bed. The heat of the moment was gone, replaced by the cold clarity of survival. "Then we stop being scientists," Ren said, "and we start being hunters." The corridors of the Apex research facility had shifted from a sterile environment of science to a labyrinth of threats. Every shadow stretched by the recessed lighting looked like a drone. Every hum of the air filtration system sounded like the charging whine of a plasma rifle. Rencade moved through the service tunnels, bypassing the main thoroughfares. He was a ghost in the machine, relying on instincts honed in the mud of border worlds rather than the polished floors of academia. He had been moving for 40 minutes since destroying the drone when his personal datapad vibrated against his ribs. It was a localized burst transmission, encrypted on a frequency used only by the facility's internal waste management systems, a channel nobody monitored because nobody cared about garbage. Ren ducked into a junction alcove, shielded by a bundle of conduit pipes, and pulled the device. The sender ID was scrambled, but the text signature was plain. "Look at the blood." Attached was a massive data file. Ren tapped the screen, his thumb hovering over the decryption key. He knew who it was. Dr. Haldren, the nervous man who wiped his sweat with a handkerchief and smelled of guilt. Haldren had looked at Ren during the tour not with fear of the princess, but with the desperate plea of a man drowning in clear sight. The file is unspooled. It was not just biological data. It was a financial ledger and a communication log. Ren scanned the documents, his eyes narrowing as the light from the screen reflected in his pupils. The funding for the aggressive behavior modification did not come from the royal treasury of Calvareth. It came from a shell corporation registered in the Sol system, a corporation fully owned by the Intergalactic Species Alliance Military High Command. Ren felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. It was a betrayal that tasted like ash. The Alliance wasn't just observing this project. They were the architects. The emails between General Vance, Ren's former commanding officer, and King Valro of Calvareth were explicit. They were not resurrecting animals for a zoo. They were breeding shock troops, biological assets capable of navigating terrain that tanks could not, possessing telepathic coordination that radio jammers could not block, and they needed a human face to legitimize the early stages. A respected xenobiologist signed off on the safety and containment protocols before the weaponization phase began. Ren was not the expert. He was the patsy. He shut off the pad. The anger that flooded him was cold and sharp. He had been fighting his attraction to Zariah, fighting the suspicion that she was playing him. Now he had proof. She was the co-founder. She was the face of the project. He needed to find her. And this time, the conversation would not be about poetry. Ren tracked her biosignature using the facility's guest override he had quietly spliced into his pad during the tour. She wasn't in her quarters. She was in the lower levels. Sector 12, an area marked geological instability, restricted. Ren moved fast. He descended the maintenance ladders, sliding down the rails, his boots hitting the grating with heavy rhythmic thuds. The air grew hotter as he went deeper, smelling of sulfur and damp fur. He found her standing in front of a reinforced airlock door that had been manually overridden. The corridor was dimly lit by emergency strips. Zariah stood with her back to him, her posture rigid, her hands pressing against the cold metal of the door. Ren stepped out of the shadows. "Tell me, Highness," he said, his voice echoing off the metal walls. "How much did the Alliance pay for your silence? Or was the trade for weapons technology?" Zaraya spun around. She looked exhausted. The bioluminescence on her skin was erratic, flashing in jagged spikes of violet and distressed gray. "Ren," she breathed, "you should not be down here." Ren walked toward her, closing the distance with predatory intent. He held up the datapad. "I have the ledger, Zaraya. I know about shell companies. I know about General Vance. You and the Alliance are cooking up telepathic monsters to drop on border worlds, and you brought me here to put a stamp of approval on the cage." Zaraya's eyes widened as she saw the data scrolling on the screen. She did not deny it. She did not flinch. She simply looked at him with a profound sadness that arrested his anger for a split second. "You think I am part of this?" she asked quietly. "You are the Crown Princess," Ren snapped. "Your name is on the door. You rescued me with military-grade sonic tech. You told me this was a battlefield. You just forgot to mention you are one of the generals." "I am not a general." Zaraya's voice rose, cracking with a raw emotion he had not heard before. "I am a prisoner who happens to wear a tiara. You think I control this? My father controls this. My brother controls the security. I am the mascot, the pretty face who likes old stories about hunters." She stepped toward him, her hands balling into fists at her sides. "I have been trying to stop this for 3 cycles. Why do you think I invited you, Ren? There are 100 xenobiologists in the Alliance who would have signed those papers for a paycheck. I chose you because you are stubborn, because you are impossible to intimidate. I chose you because I hoped you would see what I could not say." Ren paused. He looked at the datapad, then at her. The logic tracked, but trust was a currency he was currently short on. "Prove it," he said. Zaraya turned back to the airlock. She keyed in a sequence on the pad, her fingers moving with a speed that spoke of muscle memory. "Then look," she said. The heavy hydraulic locks disengaged with a hiss of escaping steam. Zaraya pushed the heavy door open and beckoned him inside. It was a cave, a natural cavern that had been sealed off from the rest of the facility, humid and smelling of moss and earth. In the center, illuminated by a single heat lamp rig, was a nesting box filled with soft synthetic blankets. Ren stepped closer, his hand hovering near the stun baton on his belt. Inside the nest lay a creature. It was a vorax, the same species as the massive armored nightmare he had seen in the tundra biome on his first day. But this one was small, perhaps the size of a large dog. Its armored plating was malformed, soft and white, lacking the dark pigmentation of the adult. Its jaw was crooked, giving it a permanent, lopsided expression. As Ren approached, the creature lifted its head. It did not hiss. It did not lunge. It made a soft, trilling sound, like a bird, and nudged Zaraya's hand as she reached down. "This is Kale," Zaraya whispered, stroking the creature's soft snout. He was the runt of the 3rd clutch. The geneticists ordered him incinerated. They said his aggression centers were underdeveloped. He was defective because he did not want to kill. Ren watched as the terrifying predator rolled onto its back, exposing its soft belly to the princess, waiting for a scratch. It was as harmless as a house cat. "I smuggled him out," Zaraya said, her voice thick with emotion. "I raised him here. I feed him by hand. He has never tasted live meat. He has no telepathic link to the pack. He is proof. Ren. Proof that the violence is not in their nature. It is in the conditioning. We are not resurrecting monsters. We are torturing animals until they go mad, and then selling their madness as a weapon." Ren looked at the creature, then at Zariah. The anger drained out of him, replaced by a heavy, aching realization. She wasn't the villain. She was the resistance, fighting a war alone in the dark with a rejected monster as her only ally. He holstered his baton. He knelt beside the nest and extended a hand. The creature sniffed his fingers, then licked his palm with a rough, sandpaper tongue. "He's beautiful," Wren said softly. Zariah let out a breath she seemed to have been holding since he arrived. She slumped against the nesting box, sliding down until she was sitting on the dirt floor. Wren sat beside her. The silence between them was no longer sharp. It was shared. "I am sorry," Wren said. "For the accusation?" Zariah shook her head, staring at the sleeping creature. "You were right to suspect me. My blood is dirty. My family has sold our scientific heritage for a seat at the galactic high table." Wren looked at her profile. In the dim light of the heat lamp, she looked stripped down. The arrogance was gone. "Why didn't you tell me?" Wren asked. "Because I did not know if I could trust you," she admitted. "Humans are unpredictable. And I was afraid." "Afraid of what?" "That you would look at me and see only the enemy." Wren reached out and took her hand. Her skin was still pulsing with erratic light, but it was calming, slowing to a steady rhythm as he held her. "I look at you, Zariah, and I see the only person on this moon who makes any sense." She turned her hand, interlacing her fingers with his. The contact was electric. She pulled his hand toward her, not to her face, but to her side. She guided his fingers to the fabric of her tunic, just above her hip. "Touch," she whispered. Wren hesitated, then slid his hand beneath the fabric. His fingers brushed against skin that was ridged and uneven. Scars, thick, raised keloids that formed a pattern along her ribs and back. They were not surgical marks, they were burned. "What is this?" Wren asked, his voice tight. "Ceremonial discipline," Zariah said, staring straight ahead. "When I refused to sign the initial grant for the weaponization project, my father ordered the high priest to correct my perspective. They use plasma brands. It is meant to remind royalty that our bodies belong to the state." Wren felt a surge of rage that had nothing to do with politics and everything to do with the woman trembling beside him. He traced the lines of the scars gently, feeling the history of her pain. "This isn't discipline," Wren said. "This is torture. It is the price of defiance," she replied. "I have worn these for 3 years. I have never shown them to anyone. Not until now." She turned to face him fully. Her eyes searched for him, desperate and wide. "Wren, I am so tired of being strong. I am tired of the politics and the secrets and the fear." She leaned in, her forehead resting against his. The scent of her, ozone and orchid nectar, filled his senses. "Make me forget," she whispered, her breath ghosted against his lips. "Make me forget my throne. Make me forget my father and the war and the monsters. Just let me feel like prey in your arms. Let me feel." Caught. The plea broke Wren. He pulled her to him, his mouth crashing onto hers. This was not the tentative exploration of the night before. This was desperate. It was the collision of two people standing on the edge of a cliff, deciding to jump together. They moved frantically, shedding clothes in the dim light of the cave. When Wren's hands touched her bare skin, she flared with light. Gold, violet, crimson, a supernova of sensation. She didn't hide it this time. She let the light wash over the cave walls, casting their shadows in sharp relief. The intimacy was a battle and a sanctuary. Zariah clung to him with a strength that was superhuman, her nails digging into his shoulders, her body arching against his. She made sounds that were not words, Primal vocalizations of release and need. Ren matched her intensity. His own reserve shattered. He wasn't the xenobiologist or the soldier. He was just a man holding on to the only thing that felt real in a universe of lies. For a span of time that had no measurement, the conspiracy didn't exist. The war beasts didn't exist. There was only the heat of her skin, the rhythm of their breath, and the way she whispered his name like it was a prayer for salvation. When the storm passed, they lay tangled together on the blankets of the nesting box, the small Vorax sleeping undisturbed beside them. Zaraya's head rested on Ren's chest. Her bioluminescence was a soft, steady white glow, illuminating the sweat on their skin. Ren ran a hand down her spine, tracing the scars he had kissed moments before. "We have to leave," Ren said, his voice rough. "We can't stay here." "I know," Zarya murmured, "but for a moment, I was free." Ren kissed the top of her head. "We can make that permanent. But we need to move. We need to get that data to the Alliance Council. The real council, not the military corruption. If we expose Vance and your father simultaneously, the political fallout will force a shutdown." Zarya sat up, her hair cascading down her back like a dark waterfall. She looked at Ren, and the steel was back in her eyes. Not the cold, royal steel, but the tempered steel of a survivor. "We need the targeting protocols," she said. "The ledger proves the money, but it does not prove the intent. We need the code that tells the beasts who to kill." "Where is it?" "On my father's private server. In the command spire." "That's a locked fortress," Ren said. Zarya stood, reaching for her tunic. "It is bio-locked to the royal bloodline. They locked everyone out. Ren, everyone except me. They think I am broken. They think I am obedient. They do not think I would dare." She pulled the tunic on, the fabric hiding the scars and the glow. "I am done being obedient." They moved through the facility like shadows. Zarya knew the blind spots in the camera grid. Ren knew how to move without sound. They reached the command spire, a tower that rose from the center of the facility like a needle. The elevator ride was tense. Ren checked the charge on his stun baton. It was low. Zarya stood with her hands clasped, staring at the floor indicators. "If we do this," she said softly, "there is no going back. I will be a traitor to my house. I will be exiled or executed." "You won't be executed," Ren said, standing beside her. "I won't let that happen." She looked at him, a small smile touching her lips. "You cannot fight a kingdom. Ren, watch me." The elevator doors opened onto the king's private observation deck. It was a room of black glass and chrome, overlooking the entire jungle biome. In the center stood a massive obsidian desk with a holographic interface. Zarya walked to the desk. She took a small ceremonial dagger from a display stand on the wall. Without hesitating, she sliced the palm of her hand. Ren started forward, but she held up a hand to stop him. "Blood key," she explained. She pressed her bleeding palm onto the interface surface. The obsidian flashed red, then green. The system hummed. Identity confirmed. Princess Zarya. Access granted. She worked quickly, her fingers flying through the holographic data streams. Ren stood guard at the door, watching the corridor. "I found it," Zarya said, her voice tight. "Project Chimera, Phase 4, targeting parameters." She swiped the data onto a portable drive. "Ren, look at this." Ren walked over. The holographic display showed a 3D model of a raptor brain, with specific neural pathways highlighted in red. "They are using pheromone tagging," Zarya explained. Pointing to the code, "The beasts are conditioned to attack specific genetic markers." "Look at the exclusion list." Ren read the scrolling text. Exclusion Calvareth Royal DNA. Exclusion Calvareth Military Personnel. And the target list? Wren asked. Zaraya swiped the screen. The list was long. Target human. Target Silari. Target Vroxian. Wren felt the blood drain from his face. It wasn't just war. It was genocide. They were programming the predators to hunt the other species of the Alliance while leaving the Calvareth untouched. It was a coup disguised as an ecological disaster. Copy it all, Wren said. Every byte. I have it, Zaraya said, pulling the drive. We need to... A siren shattered the silence. It was not the low thrum of a security alert. It was the screaming, oscillating wail of a containment breach. The lights in the room flashed from white to emergency crimson. Wren spun toward the window overlooking the biome. Below them, in the sector housing the raptors and the saber-tooths. The heavy blast doors were opening, not forcing open, sliding open smoothly. Someone opened the cages, Wren said, horror dawning on him. Zaraya checked the console. It is a remote command, authorization code. She stopped, her face pale. Whose code? Wren demanded. Zaraya looked at him, her eyes filled with terror. Mine. What? I didn't input it, Zaraya cried. Someone used a spoofed signature. They are framing me. Wren grabbed her arm. We need to go. Now! The intercom system crackled to life. The voice was smooth, deep, and terrifyingly calm. It was Prince Kalen, Zaria's brother. Attention all personnel. A traitor has released the specimens. Princess Zaraya has compromised the facility. Security teams are authorized to terminate on site. Repeat, terminate the traitor and her human accomplice. Wren looked out the window. In the jungle below, the shadows were moving, hundreds of them. The raptors were pouring out of the containment sector, flowing like a river of teeth and claws into the main compound. And they were hungry. Wren looked at Zaraya. She was trembling, the drive clutched in her hand. They are going to kill everyone, she whispered. The staff, the scientists. They are just meat to them now. Wren pulled her toward the emergency stairwell. Not everyone, Wren said, kicking the door open. Just the ones who don't know how to run. Move! They sprinted into the stairwell as the first screams began to echo from the lower levels. The hunt had begun. And this time, there was no glass between them and the monsters. The emergency lighting in the Apex Research Facility did not provide illumination so much as it painted the chaos in shades of arterial red. The corridors, once pristine avenues of science, were now choked with smoke and the acrid stench of burning circuitry. Somewhere in the distance, beyond the screaming alarms, came the wet, tearing sounds of the resurrected feasting on their creators. Rencade did not stop to listen. He moved with a momentum that was purely survival-driven, gripping Zaraya's hand as they sprinted past the shattered glass of the observation decks. The facility was dying. The automated systems had locked down the blast doors to contain the breach. But the containment was a farce. The predators were not just loose. They were hunting with the telepathic coordination Wren had feared. We cannot go to the landing pad, Wren shouted over the roar of a ruptured steam pipe. The elevators are dead. The raptors will be waiting at the choke points. Zaraya was keeping pace, her ceremonial tunic torn at the hem to allow for movement. In her other arm, she clutched a cylindrical canister made of reinforced plasteel, hugging it to her chest like a child. We have to make for the perimeter breach in Sector 12, she yelled back. The structural integrity there was already weak. It is the fastest way into the jungle. Wren glanced at the canister. Zaraya had refused to leave the secret den without it, wasting precious seconds to initialize the portable stasis field. It contained a single egg, harvested from the uncorrupted genetic line she had been protecting. It was heavy, awkward, and slowed them down. But the look in her eyes when he had suggested leaving it silenced any argument. They reached the maintenance bay for Sector 12. The door was buckled, dented from the inside by something massive. Ren kicked the release lever, and the heavy metal slab groaned open just enough for them to squeeze through. The humidity hit them instantly. They tumbled out of the sterile, dying world of the station and into the suffocating embrace of the Calvareth night. The jungle was alive, a cacophony of chirps, screeches, and the rustle of a million unseen things moving in the dark. Ren pulled Zariah into the cover of a massive fern cluster. He checked his stun baton. The charge indicator was blinking red, 10%, enough for maybe 2 strikes. He shoved it into his belt and drew his survival knife. It was archaic compared to the plasma rifles the security teams used, but a blade never ran out of ammunition. "Stay low," Ren commanded, his voice a harsh whisper. "The security grid is down, which means the perimeter fences are offline. We are in the wild now." Zariah nodded, wiping soot from her forehead. Her bioluminescence was dim, clamped down by sheer will to avoid giving away their position. "Where do we go?" "The emergency beacon," Ren said. "Every Alliance facility has a hard-wired distress buoy located outside the blast radius. It is 3 miles east, on the ridge." They moved. Ren took point, hacking through the dense vines with efficient, brutal swings. He read the jungle like a text. He saw the broken twigs that indicated a heavy animal had passed recently. He smelled the musk of the territorial markers on the trees. He kept them downwind, moving through the stream beds to mask their scent. They had covered a mile when the sky above them changed. The twin moons were obscured by a sudden shifting cloud of shapes. Ren stopped, holding up a hand. Above the canopy, leather wings beat against the humid air. It was a sound like wet sheets snapping in a gale. "Sky rippers," Zariah hissed. "They are nocturnal scavengers. They smell the blood from the facility." "They aren't scavenging," Ren said, watching the shadows circle lower. "They are hunting." A shriek tore through the canopy and the first creature dived. It was a nightmare of evolution. A winged reptile with a wingspan of 8 feet, a beak serrated like a saw, and talons designed to snatch prey from the ground at high speed. It crashed through the leaves, aiming straight for Zariah. Ren moved before the thought fully formed. He tackled Zariah, sending them both rolling into the mud as the creature's talons raked the air where she had been standing. The Sky Ripper slammed into the earth, screeching in frustration. Ren was up instantly, as the beast turned, snapping its beak. Ren stepped inside its guard. He didn't slash wildly. He drove the survival knife upward, under the jaw, into the soft tissue of the brain stem. The creature convulsed once and collapsed. 2 more dropped from the trees. Ren grabbed the dead creature's wing and heaved the carcass at the first attacker, knocking it off balance. He spun to face the second, his knife hand moving in a blur. The second beast lunged, its beak clamping onto Ren's forearm. Ren grunted but didn't pull away. He used the leverage to twist the creature's neck, driving his knee into its chest with a sickening crack of hollow bones. He ripped his arm free, blood welling up from the puncture wounds, and slashed the throat of the stumbling third beast. It was over in 10 seconds. Violence, efficient and absolute. Ren stood panting, the rain of the jungle mixing with the blood on his arm. He wiped the knife on his pant leg and turned to Zariah. She was still on the ground, clutching the egg canister, staring at him with wide, dilated eyes. "Are you hurt?" Ren asked, scanning the trees for more. Zariah shook her head slowly. She stood up, ignoring the mud on her tunic. "You moved faster than they did. You did not hesitate." "Hesitation is what kills you," Ren said, checking the bandage on his arm. It was soaked through. Ziraya stepped closer, looking at the dead creatures. They are faster than Alliance drones, and you killed 3 of them with a piece of steel. She looked up at his face, her expression a mix of horror and awe. You really are the last human hunter, she whispered. It was not a title of nobility. It was a recognition of what he was, a creature that knew how to kill to survive. We need to keep moving, Ren said, ignoring the praise. The blood will attract the ground predators. The sky opened up. It began with a few heavy drops, warm and thick, before turning into a deluge. The rain on Calvareth 9 was torrential, a vertical river that turned the jungle floor into a slurry of mud and rotting vegetation. They found shelter under the root system of a massive ironwood tree. The roots formed a natural cavern, dry and protected from the wind. Ren checked the perimeter, ensuring nothing else had claimed the den, before sliding down against the wood. He hissed as he sat, clutching his arm. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind the sharp, throbbing pain of the bite. Let me see, Ziraya said. She set the egg canister down carefully in the driest corner and knelt beside him. It's fine, Ren said through gritted teeth. Just a scratch. It is a puncture wound from a carrion eater, Ziraya corrected sternly. If infection sets in, you will lose the arm by morning. She reached into the pouch at her belt and pulled out a small med kit. She uncorked a vial of clear liquid, likely a localized antiseptic, and a roll of bio-weave bandage. Ren leaned his head back against the root, closing his eyes as she poured the liquid over the wound. It burned like liquid fire, but he didn't make a sound. He felt her fingers working, cleaning the jagged tear in his flesh. Her touch was surprisingly gentle, a stark contrast to the violence of the last hour. Her hands trembled slightly. He opened his eyes. In the darkness of the root cave, her bioluminescence was the only light. It was soft now, a pale, healing green that radiated from her chest and arms. He watched her face as she worked. She was biting her lip, her brow furrowed in concentration. Why did you come here? Ziraya? Ren asked softly. She paused, holding the bandage. I told you. To oversee the project, Ren shook his head. No. Why did you come to me? Why did you bring me to this moon? You could have hired a mercenary if you wanted a bodyguard. You could have hired a lawyer if you wanted to expose the fraud. You hired a xenobiologist who specializes in extinct killers. Ziraya finished wrapping the bandage and tied it off. She didn't pull her hands away. She rested them on his arm, her thumbs brushing the skin above his wrist. She looked up, her eyes meeting him. The green light of her skin shifted, warming to a soft, flushed amber. I was lonely. Ren frowned. You are a princess. You are surrounded by people. I am surrounded by subjects, she said, and sycophants, and family members who see me as a breeding asset or a political nuisance. I have never met anyone who understood the part of me that feels wild. She leaned forward slightly. The space between them shrank. The sound of the rain outside was a deafening roar, isolating them in the small, dry pocket of the world. I read your books, Ziraya continued, her voice barely audible over the storm. You wrote that predators are the most honest creatures in the galaxy because they do not hide their hunger. They do not apologize for wanting to survive. She moved her hand from his arm to his chest, her palm flat against his wet shirt. She could feel his heart hammering. I didn't come to study predators. Ren, I came to see if humans could love something dangerous, like me. Ren looked at her. He saw the woman beneath the alien, the loneliness beneath the crown. He saw the scars he had touched earlier, the evidence of her rebellion. She was dangerous. She was a walking political explosion, a biological weapon, and a fugitive. And he wanted her more than he had ever wanted safety. "You aren't a monster." "Zariah," Ren said, his voice rough. Zariah let out a shaky breath. "Then why does everyone look at me like one? Everyone but you?" Ren reached up and cupped her face. Her skin was hot, feverish with the intensity of her emotions. "I look at you and I see the only thing worth saving on this entire godforsaken rock." Zariah made a low sound, a whimper of need, and closed the distance. The kiss was fierce. It tasted of rain and ozone and blood. There was no hesitation this time, no careful navigation of species barriers. It was a collision of two souls who had been running for a lifetime and had finally crashed into each other. Ren pulled her onto his lap, his hands tangling in her wet hair. Zariah straddled him, pressing her body against his, seeking the friction, the heat, the pressure. Her skin flared with bright, chaotic colors, violet, gold, blinding white, illuminating the hollow of the tree roots like a lightning storm. They moved with a desperation that bordered on pain. Clothes were heavy, wet obstacles that were shoved aside. When skin touched skin, the bioelectric charge of her body made Ren gasp, a physical shock that jump-started every nerve ending he possessed. It wasn't just sex. It was a claim. Zariah kissed his jaw, his throat, her hands gripping his shoulders as if he were the only solid thing in a dissolving universe. Ren held her with a strength that would have bruised a human, but she only pressed closer, demanding more. In the dark, with the monsters hunting outside, they carved out a moment of absolute defiant life. They loved like it was the last act of a dying world, hungry, frantic, and completely without shame. When the storm finally broke, hours later, the silence that followed was heavy. The jungle dripped. Ren and Zariah lay entangled, covered by his thermal jacket. Zariah was asleep, her head on his shoulder, her hand resting protectively over the egg canister she had pulled close to them. Her glow had faded to a steady, rhythmic pulse of blue, syncing with her breathing. Ren stared out at the gray light of dawn filtering through the roots. He felt a fierce protectiveness welling up in him. He wasn't just getting her out because it was the right thing to do. He was getting her out because she was his. He shook her gently. "Zariah, we have to move. The dawn patrols will be up." She woke instantly, the soldier in her taking over before the princess could protest. She sat up, pulling her tunic back into place, smoothing her hair. She looked at him, and for a second, the vulnerability was there again. "Ren," she started. "We get to the beacon," Ren said, standing and offering her a hand. "We call in the cavalry when we end this." They moved out. The jungle was steaming in the morning heat. The mud was slick, making the ascent up the ridge treacherous. It took them 2 hours to reach the coordinates. The emergency beacon was a silver pylon driven into the rock of a high overlook. It commanded a view of the entire valley, the white dome of the facility visible in the distance. Smoke rising from its shattered roof. "There it is," Zariah said, relief flooding her voice. She started forward, but Ren grabbed her belt and yanked her back behind a boulder. "Down!" he barked. "Why? It's the beacon. We just need to—" "Look at the ground," Ren whispered, pointing. Zariah looked. The soil around the base of the pylon was disturbed. Fresh earth, and there was a faint shimmer in the air, a tripwire laser, nearly invisible against the morning sun. "It's rigged," Ren said. "Someone mined the approach." Zariah paled. "They knew we would come here. It's a kill box. So we don't trigger it," Ren said, "and we circle around, try to disable the—" A snap of a twig behind them was the only warning. Ren spun, drawing his knife. but a heavy boot kicked the blade from his hand. A second kick caught him in the chest, sending him sprawling backward into the dirt. Standing over him was a figure clad in the black polished armor of the Royal Guard. He held a vibro blade, the edge humming with lethal energy. He didn't look at Ren. He looked at Zariah. "The king sends his regards." "Princess," the assassin said. His voice was mechanically amplified, devoid of humanity. "And the prince sends his regrets." He raised the blade. Ren scrambled for a rock, for dirt, for anything. But he was too far away. The assassin wasn't going for Ren. He was going for Zariah. Zariah didn't back away. She didn't scream. She stood her ground, clutching the egg canister in her left hand. Her right hand slipped behind her back. The assassin lunged. It happened in a blur. Zariah sidestepped with a fluidity that belied her exhaustion. As the vibro blade slashed the air where her throat had been, she drove her right hand forward. She wasn't holding a weapon. She was holding a shard of jagged glass she must have picked up from the facility wreckage. She didn't aim for the armor. She aimed for the unarmored joint at the neck. She drove the glass into the soft seal of the suit. The assassin gurgled, stumbling back. Zariah didn't stop. She kicked his knee, shattering the joint, and as he fell, she grabbed the vibro blade from his failing grip. With a single, clean motion, she drove the blade through his chest plate. The assassin went still. Ren stared from the ground. He had seen soldiers kill. He had seen predators kill, but he had never seen a princess kill with such cold, intimate efficiency. Zariah stood over the body, breathing hard. Her hands were covered in blood, the assassin's and her own, from gripping the glass. She dropped the vibro blade. Ren stood up slowly. He walked over to her. Zariah looked down at the corpse. He was my brother's personal guard. I grew up with him. He taught me how to ride a graviton bike. She looked up at Ren, her eyes dry and hard as flint. "This is how royals protect their secrets," she whispered. "They send the people you love to kill you." Ren reached out and wiped a smear of blood from her cheek. "We can't use the beacon. If they send him, they have a sniper watching it, or a remote detonator." "Then we are trapped," Zariah said, her voice threatening to crack. "We have nowhere to go." Ren looked out at the valley. He scanned the horizon, past the jungle, past the facility. In the distance, where the tectonic plates of the moon met, there was a massive jagged scar in the earth, a canyon shrouded in permanent mist. "The Dead Zone Canyon," Ren said. Zariah looked at him. "That is a radioactive graveyard." "The magnetic interference crashes anything that flies over it?" "Exactly," Ren said, "which means there are wrecks down there. Ships that crashed years ago. So, they are dead metal. Most of them, yes. But 3 years ago, a smuggling freighter went down in the upper ridge. I remember reading the report. It was carrying heavy ion batteries. If the core is still intact, we can wire it to the comms array. We can't boost a signal through magnetic interference." Zariah argued. "We don't need to boost a signal out," Ren said. "We just need to create a pulse strong enough to punch a hole in the atmospheric jamming. A distress flare on the subspace spectrum. Every ship in the sector will hear it." "It is a 3-day trek," Zariah said. "Through territory even the predators avoid." Ren picked up his knife from the dirt. He looked at the egg canister in her arms, then at the fire in her eyes. "We are hunters, remember?" Ren said, offering her a grim smile. "We don't avoid dangerous territory. We own it." Zariah looked at the assassin one last time, then nodded. She adjusted her grip on the egg. "Lead the way." "Ren." They turned their backs on the trap and the dead guard, descending the ridge toward the mist-shrouded canyon. The jungle swallowed them again, but they were no longer running in panic. They were moving with purpose. The prey had become the predator, and they were going to burn the sky to let the galaxy know they were still alive. The Dead Zone Canyon was a wound in the crust of Calvareth 9, a jagged tear where the tectonic plates had pulled apart to reveal the planet's bleeding core. The mist here was not water vapor, but a cocktail of heavy gases and magnetic static that tasted like copper on the tongue. Rencade adjusted the strap of his pack, his eyes scanning the ridgeline. The air was cooler here, shielded from the oppressive suns by the towering walls of slate and iron-rich rock. Beside him, Princess Zerea walked with a grim determination, the canister containing the predator egg strapped to her chest like a second heart. They had been walking for 6 hours in a silence that was heavier than the gravity. Zerea stopped near a fissure that vented steam. She looked back at the way they had come, the jungle now just a green smudge on the horizon. "I was the useless one," she said. Ren stopped, turning to look at her. The mist swirled around her legs, making her look like a spirit tethered to the ground only by the weight of her burden. "What?" Ren asked. "In my family," Zerea continued, staring at the rock. "There is a hierarchy of utility. My brother, Kalen, was the soldier. He had the killer instinct before he could walk. My sister, Ilara, was a diplomat. She could lie in 5 languages by the time she was 7. She looked up at Ren. Her eyes were dry, but there was a tremor in her jaw. And then there was Zerea, the dreamer, the one who spent her time in the archives reading about earth tigers and Terran wolves instead of attending council meetings. I refused to marry the Duke of the Vroxian system because he smelled like greed. I refused to commission a battleship because I wanted to build a sanctuary. I was embarrassed, a spare heir with no purpose. Ren stepped closer, wiping the sweat from his brow. "You built the research facility and you found a purpose." Zerea laughed, a harsh, brittle sound. "I did not build it. Ren, I was given it, like a toy to keep the child quiet. My father let me play with the extinct DNA because he knew he could use it later. He let me feel important so I wouldn't notice when he turned my sanctuary into an armory." She took a breath, her gaze locking onto his. "And when the Alliance military demanded a human face to legitimize the weaponization phase, my father told me to find someone credible, someone with a reputation for surviving, but who was burned out enough to be desperate for a win. Someone solitary, who wouldn't be missed if an accident happened during the field tests." Ren felt the blood go cold in his veins. The sound of the venting steam suddenly seemed very loud. He took a step back, his survival instincts flaring. "You picked me," Ren said. His voice was flat. Zerea nodded. "I read your dossier. You were perfect. The famous Dr. Rencade, the man who loved predators more than people. I was supposed to lure you here. I was supposed to charm you, let you sign the safety protocols, and then—" "Then what?" Ren demanded, his hand drifting toward the knife at his belt. "Then you were supposed to die in a tragic accident during a tracking exercise," Zerea whispered. The narrative was already written. The brave scientist, mauled by the very beasts he sought to understand. It would have closed the case files. The facility would have operated in the dark, protected by the tragedy of your death. Ren stared at her. The betrayal hit him harder than the assassin's kick had. He had opened up to her. He had let himself believe, for the first time in 20 years, that he wasn't just a tool for war, and the whole time, he was just a pig being led to the slaughter. "I am not telling you this to hurt you," Zerea said, stepping toward him. "I am telling you because I need you to know that I failed. You failed? Ren scoffed, turning away. You seem to have done a fine job. I am here. I am hunted, and I am very likely going to die on this rock. I failed because I fell in love with the target, Zaraya shouted. The words echoed off the canyon walls. Ren froze. He didn't turn around. I was supposed to walk you to the slaughterhouse, Zaraya said, her voice breaking. But then you looked at the Vorax with respect instead of fear. Then you touched my scars and didn't flinch. You saw me. Ren. Not the princess. Not the failure. You saw me. And I realized I would burn my entire kingdom to the ground before I let them hurt you. Ren stood there, his chest heaving. The logic of the soldier warred with the heart of the man. She had lied. But she was also standing here, in the radioactive mud, carrying an egg and fighting her own brother to keep him alive. He turned slowly. Before he could speak, the ground beneath them trembled. It wasn't an earthquake. From the mist ahead, a shape emerged. It was a massive quadrupedal tank of muscle and bone, a titan bear, another resurrected horror. But this one was not from the facility. It was an escapee from an earlier failed batch, surviving in the radioactive wasteland. Its skin was ulcerated, its eyes milky white with blindness, relying on thermal scent. It roared, a sound that vibrated in the marrow of their bones. Ren moved. The anger, the betrayal, the confusion, it all vanished, replaced by the singular, crystal-clear imperative of combat. Left, Ren shouted. Zaraya didn't hesitate. She didn't ask why. She broke left, scrambling up a shelf of slate, clutching the egg. The titan bear charged, its massive paws crushing the rock where she had been standing. It turned, sniffing the air, tracking the heat of the egg. Ren whistled, a sharp, piercing sound. He snatched a flare from his belt, struck it, and threw it at the beast's face. Over here, you ugly bastard! The bear roared in pain as the magnesium fire blinded its thermal sensors. It swiped wildly, its claws gouging deep furrows in the stone. Ren drew his knife. He couldn't kill it. It was too big. He had to turn it. Zaraya! The vent! Ren yelled. Zaraya was already moving. She understood the play without needing a diagram. She scrambled above the steam vent, grabbed a loose boulder the size of a human head, and heaved it. The rock struck the edge of the vent, shearing off the cap. A geyser of superheated steam erupted sideways, directly into the titan bear's flank. The beast shrieked, the heat driving it back. It stumbled, confused and burned, and retreated into the thickest part of the mist, deciding that the meal wasn't worth the pain. Ren stood panting, his knife still raised. Zaraya slid down the slate, landing beside him. They looked at each other, chests heaving, adrenaline binding them together tighter than any vow. Ren looked at the dirt on her face, the fierce light in her eyes. He realized that the past didn't matter. The lie didn't matter. What mattered was that when the monster charged, she didn't run away. She climbed a rock to flank it. We aren't done talking about this, Ren said, sheathing his knife. I know, Zaraya replied, adjusting the egg canister. But, Ren added, grabbing her hand and pulling her toward the canyon floor. That was a hell of a throw. They found the wreckage an hour later. The freighter was a skeletal hulk half buried in the canyon wall, its hull plates rusted and overgrown with gray, radioactive moss. It lay at a steep angle, looking like a metallic beast that had died clawing its way toward the sky. Ren pried the airlock open with a pry bar he found in the debris field. The interior was dark, smelling of stale air and ancient hydraulic fluid. Be careful, Ren warned, turning on his shoulder light. The deck plating is unstable. They navigated the tilted corridors, making their way to the bridge. The heavy ion battery Zaraya had mentioned was located in the engineering sublevel. But Ren needed the comms console first. He bypassed the dead biometric scanner and hot-wired the console using the power cell from his stun baton. The screen flickered to life, casting a ghostly blue glow over the dead bridge. Ren tapped into the ship's black box. He needed to check the atmospheric interference levels before they tried to rig the pulse. The data stream scrolled by. Ren's eyes narrowed. "Wait," he said. "What is it?" Zaraya asked, standing guard at the door. "This ship. It wasn't a smuggler." Ren pulled up the manifest. It was encrypted with Alliance military ciphers. "This was a courier vessel," Ren said, his voice hollow. "It was carrying a diplomatic pouch from the Alliance High Command to your father. It crashed 3 years ago." He opened the file. There, illuminated in the cold blue light, was the smoking gun. It was a treaty draft. Subject: Calvareth Independence and Defense Protocols. Summary: the Intergalactic Species Alliance agrees to overlook the violation of the resurrection laws regarding predator weaponization, provided that House Calvareth agrees to maintain neutrality in the upcoming border conflicts and supplies biological assets exclusively to Alliance Black Ops. Ren stepped back from the console. "They knew," he whispered. "The Alliance Council, the Senate, they all knew. It wasn't just a rogue general. It was government policy. They let you build monsters because they wanted to buy them." Zaraya walked over to the screen. She read the text, her face illuminated by the cold light. "Political balance," she said bitterly. "My father gets his army, and the Alliance gets a guarantee that he won't use it against them. And the galaxy sleeps soundly, thinking the monsters are extinct." She looked at Ren. "We have no one to call. Ren, if we send this signal, the Alliance won't come to save us. They will come to silence us." Ren looked at the treaty. She was right. If they broadcast a standard distress call, the nearest Alliance cruiser would pick them up and space them out the airlock before they could speak. "No," Ren said, a hard edge entering his voice. "We don't call for help. We blow the whistle. We don't send a distress signal to the military. We broadcast this treaty on the open civilian band. We send it to every news outlet, every independent colony, every trade ship in the sector." "That will start a war," Zaraya said softly. "It will start the truth," Ren corrected. "And it's the only way we survive. If the public knows, they can't kill us without making us martyrs." Zaraya stared at the screen for a long moment. Then she reached down and unclasped the royal signet ring from her finger. It was heavy gold, inset with the data key to the royal archives. She placed it on the console. "If we do this," she said, "I am destroying my house. My father will be deposed. My brother will be imprisoned. I will have no home to go back to." Ren turned to her. He saw the weight of the decision pressing down on her. She wasn't just a princess anymore. She was a woman standing in the wreckage of her life, holding a match. "You don't have to do it," Ren said. "We can run. We can disappear into the outer rim." Zaraya shook her head. "No. Running is for prey." She looked up at him. Her bioluminescence flared, a soft, steady white light that pushed back the shadows of the bridge. "Ren," she said, her voice trembling. "If we survive this, I will give it up. The title, the crown, the claim to the throne. I will walk away from it all. I will go with you to Earth, or to the Rim, or anywhere you want." She stepped closer, placing her hands on his chest. "I will be nobody. Just Zaraya. Is that enough?" Ren looked at her. He saw the fear in her eyes, not fear of death, but fear that without the crown, she wasn't enough. He reached up and covered her hands with his. "I never wanted the princess," Ren said roughly. I hated the princess. She was arrogant and dangerous. He leaned in, his forehead resting against hers. But the woman who climbed a steam vent to save my life? The woman who raised a monster with love because she couldn't bear to see it hurt? I want her. Zaraya let out a sob, a sound of pure release. I don't want your crown. Zaraya, Ren whispered against her lips, I want your freedom. She kissed him. It wasn't like a kiss in the rain. It wasn't frantic or hungry. It was solid. It was an anchor dropping in a storm. It tasted of dust and tears and absolute promise. It was a kiss that said, if we die, we die. They broke apart, breathless. Zaraya looked at him, her eyes shining. Can I call the human who hunted them? She asked softly, the question no longer a riddle but an invitation. Ren smiled, a crooked, genuine smile that lit up his scarred face. Only if I can call the alien who tamed me. The moment held for a heartbeat, perfect and fragile. Then the ship shook. Dust rained down from the ceiling. The hull groaned as something impacted the canyon floor outside with enough force to register on the seismic sensors. Ren spun to the console. The proximity alarm was flashing. Troop transport, Ren said, his voice turning to ice. Hard landing, 300 meters out. Zaraya checked the external cameras. Through the grain of the static, they saw figures moving in the mist, armored figures, not the clumsy movement of the Titan bear, but the tactical precision of a kill squad. 6 of them. Ren counted. Heavy armor, thermal optics. They aren't here to arrest us. Zaraya grabbed the egg canister. We need time to rig the battery to the comms array, she said. The upload will take 5 minutes once the power is connected. You rig it, Ren said, checking his knife. I'll buy you 10. Ren? He turned to her. Get the signal out. Zaraya, burn the sky. Ren moved to the airlock. He didn't look back. He slipped out into the mist, into the wreckage, disappearing into the gray like a ghost. Outside, the canyon was a kill box. The squad of Royal Guard commandos moved in a wedge formation, their rifles raised. They had thermal scanners, but in the dead zone, the geothermal vents created false positives everywhere. Ren used that. He didn't engage them directly. He became the environment. He coated himself in the radioactive mud to mask his heat signature. He moved through the rusted skeletal ribs of the ship's exposed hull. The point man passed beneath a hanging girder. Ren dropped. He didn't use the knife. He used gravity. He slammed his boots into the guard's helmet, driving the man face first into the rock. Before the guard could recover, Ren ripped the power pack from his rifle and rolled into the shadows. Contact! Rear flank! The squad opened fire, plasma bolts sizzling through the mist, melting the rock where Ren had been a second before. Ren circled. He was breathing slowly, his heart rate controlled. He was the apex predator now. He knew the terrain. They were fighting a map. He was fighting a home. He found a nest of vipers, small, acid-spitting lizards, disturbed by the gunfire. Ren scooped up a handful of gravel and threw it at the squad's heavy gunner. The gunner turned and fired. The shot went wide, hitting the viper nest. The swarm erupted. Chaos ensued. The guards shouted, firing at the small, fast targets. In the confusion, Ren struck again. He came out of the mist like a demon, using the stolen power pack as an improvised grenade. He threw it at the feet of the 2 center guards and shot it with his stun pistol. The explosion was blinding. The concussion wave knocked the guards off their feet. Ren moved in with the knife. He slashed the leg servos of one, incapacitating him. He disarmed another with a brutal wrist lock. But there were too many. A shot caught him in the shoulder, the same arm the Sky Ripper had bitten. Ren grunted, stumbling back behind a slab of hull plating. The pain was blinding. He checked the count on 3 down, 3 up. and he was bleeding. Inside the ship, Zaraya's hands flew across the exposed wiring of the heavy ion battery. Sparks flew as she bypassed the safety regulators. "Come on," she hissed. She connected the final coupling. The ship's lights surged from dim blue to blinding white. The reactor groaned, coming online after 3 years of death. She sprinted to the comms console. Power levels, 100%. She slotted the drive with the treaty data and the targeting protocols. She typed in the override command. Access code required. She hesitated. The code was her father's birth date. It was the code of the man who had made her a weapon. She typed it in. Access denied. Lockdown initiated. Zaraya froze. He had changed it. Of course he had. "Ren!" she screamed over the comms link. "It's locked out. I can't broadcast." Outside, Ren heard her. He was pinned down by heavy fire, dirt kicking up into his face. "Use the Royal Emergency Override," Ren shouted back, firing a blind shot over the cover. "That only works for a distress call," Zaraya yelled. "It won't attach the data files. Then make the distress call count." Ren roared. "Use your voice. Zaraya, tell them." Zaraya stared at the console. The upload bar was grayed out. She couldn't send the files, but she could open a live audio channel on the royal frequency, a channel that would override every receiver in the quadrant. She keyed the mic. She closed her eyes for a second, imagining the throne room, the weight of the crown, the silence of her life. Then she opened them. "This is Princess Zaraya of House Calvareth." Her voice boomed from the ship's external speakers, echoing through the canyon, amplified by the boosted signal. The guards outside froze. They looked up at the wrecked ship. Ren seized the moment. He broke cover, charging the distracted captain. He didn't go for the kill, but he tackled him, driving him into the mud, wrestling the rifle away. Zaraya's voice continued, steady and regal, filling the sky. "I am declaring a planetary state of emergency. The Apex research facility has been compromised. The Alliance military has conspired with my father, King Valro, to breed sentient biological weapons in violation of galactic law." In the ship, Zaraya watched the signal strength meter. It was punching through the interference. "To the citizens of the galaxy, the monsters are not in the jungle. They are in the throne room, and they are in the Alliance Senate. I possess the evidence. Come and get it." She hit the transmit button. The energy pulse from the heavy ion battery fired. A beam of pure, coherent light shot from the ship's array, piercing the mist, piercing the clouds, and punching a hole through the atmosphere. It was a beacon that could be seen from orbit. Outside, the guard captain threw Ren off. He raised his sidearm, aiming at Ren's head. "The traitor dies," the captain snarls. Ren looked at the barrel. He was exhausted. He was bleeding. He grinned. "She already won," he said. A screech tore the air. It wasn't a sky ripper. It wasn't a Titan bear. From the ridge above, a pack of Alpha Draco raptors descended. They had followed the noise. They had followed the psychic distress of the battle, and they were hungry. But they didn't look at Ren. They looked at the guards. Their slit pupils dilated. They recognized the armor. They remembered the prods and the cages. The captain turned, his eyes widening. The lead raptor pounced. Ren scrambled back as the canyon floor erupted into a frenzy of scales and teeth. The predators had arrived, not to kill the humans, but to settle the score with their jailers. Ren watched as the jungle reclaimed its own. He looked up at the ship, where the beam of light was still burning a hole in the sky. He lay back in the mud, the pain in his shoulder a dull throb, and laughed. She had done it. The useless princess had just toppled a kingdom. The transmission that beamed from the wreck in the Dead Zone Canyon did not just pierce the atmospheric jamming of Calvareth 9. It pierced the veil of silence that had shrouded the Galactic Alliance for a decade. The data packet Zariah had authorized was comprehensive. It contained banking ledgers, genetic modification logs, video footage of the brutal conditioning protocols, and the signed treaty between King Valro and the Alliance High Command. It hit the subspace relays at the speed of light, and within an hour, it was playing on every holographic news terminal from the core worlds to the outer rim. The reaction was immediate and cataclysmic. On Earth, protesters flooded the streets of the capital, demanding the resignation of the military representatives who had authorized the funding. On the hive world of Xylos, the insectoid collective ceased all trade with the Alliance in protest of the biological perversion. The Vroxian Duchy mobilized their fleet, not for war, but to enforce a blockade around Calvareth 9 to prevent the destruction of evidence. Rencade and Princess Zariah watched the galaxy burn from the bridge of the wrecked courier ship. They were tired, bloodied, and running on adrenaline fumes. But they were alive. The Alpha Draco Raptors, having sated their vengeance on the Royal Guard, had vanished back into the mist, leaving the two fugitives alone with the humming comms console. Rescue came 12 hours later. It was not an Alliance military cruiser, but a coalition of independent media vessels and medical frigates, escorted by a rogue Vroxian destroyer. They had come to see the truth. The extraction was chaotic. News drones buzzed around the canyon like gnats, capturing the image that would define the era. The scarred human survivalist and the renegade alien princess, emerging from the radioactive fog, battered but unbroken, carrying a canister that contained the last hope of a corrupted species. The days that followed were a blur of medical bays, debriefings, and tribunal summons. Ren refused to leave Zariah's side. When the Alliance military police attempted to separate them for questioning, Ren had simply placed his hand on his stun baton and informed them that the only way they were taking her was over a pile of bodies. Given his reputation and the current public relations nightmare, they backed down. The political fallout was swift. King Valro was forced to abdicate his throne to avoid a galactic sanction that would have crippled his planet's economy. Prince Kalen was arrested by his own surviving generals, who were eager to distance themselves from the weaponization project. General Vance, the architect on the Alliance side, was court-martialed in a public broadcast that broke viewer records. But for Zariah, the victory was bittersweet. The High Council of Calvareth, composed of the planet's religious and cultural elders, convened a special session. They could not imprison her. She was a hero to the galaxy, but they could not keep her. She had broken the blood seal. She had exposed the shame of her house to the stars. The sentence was exile. The ceremony took place on the royal landing platform, under the light of the twin moons. It was a stark, silent affair. There were no crowds, only the council members in their heavy robes and the waiting transport shuttle that would take her away forever. Ren stood by the shuttle ramp, his duffel bag over his shoulder. He wore clean clothes for the first time in weeks, a simple gray tunic and trousers, but he still looked like a soldier. He watched as the high priest stepped forward to remove the royal signet crest from Zariah's collar. Zariah stood tall. She did not weep. She wore a simple white dress, devoid of the structural armor or ceremonial jewels she had once worn. Her bioluminescence was calm, a steady, resolute white light that seemed to outshine the moons. "You are hereby severed from the root," the high priest intoned, his voice heavy with regret. "You are no longer in the house. You are no longer of the soil. You are adrift." Zariah looked the priest in the eye. "I am not adrift," she said, her voice clear and amplified by the acoustics of the platform. "I am free." She turned from the council, She did not bow. She did not look back at the spires of the palace where she had grown up as the useless, dreaming princess. She walked toward the shuttle, her steps firm. Ren met her at the bottom of the ramp. He didn't say a word. He just extended his hand. Zariah took it. Her grip was strong, her skin warm against his. "Ready?" Ren asked. Zariah looked at the shuttle, then at the stars beyond. "I have been ready for 20 years. They boarded the ship together, leaving the gravity of Calvareth behind. 6 months later, the Sanctuary Station Orbiter 4 hung in the neutral space of the nebula drift, a swirling cloud of purple and gold gas that served as a demilitarized zone for scientific collaboration. It was a massive wheel-shaped station, designed as a haven for refugees, endangered species, and those who simply needed to disappear. It was here that Ren and Zariah had built a life. The station was a hub of activity. The fall of the weaponization project had sparked a renaissance in ethical xenobiology. Scientists from a dozen worlds flocked to the station to study the data Ren and Zariah had released. Ren Cade, the man who had spent his life hunting monsters in the mud, found himself in a lecture hall with a holographic whiteboard. He stood before a class of 40 students, humans, Silari, Vroxians, and even a few young Calvarethians who had left their homeworld in the wake of the scandal. Ren wore a tweed jacket with patches on the elbows, a concession to academia, though he still wore his combat boots. "The Predator is not a villain," Ren said, his voice echoing in the quiet hall. He tapped the console, bringing up a hologram of the six-eyed hexapanther. "The Predator is a mirror. It reflects the health of the ecosystem. When the Predator becomes a monster, it is because the system is broken." He looked at the students. His gaze was less intense than it had been in the jungle, but it still held the weight of experience. "We do not study them to control them. We study them to understand our place in the food chain, and to remember that respect is the only safety mechanism that actually works." A hand went up in the back row. A young human girl. "Professor Cade," she asked, "is it true that you fought one with a knife?" Ren smiled, a small, crooked expression. "I survived one with a knife," he corrected. "There is a difference. And I had help." Across the station, in the grand atrium, Zariah was fighting a different kind of battle. She stood on a podium made of floating anti-grav discs, addressing a delegation of diplomats from the newly reformed Alliance Council. She wore a suit of dark blue silk, tailored and professional, but she wore no jewelry. Her only adornment was the faint, rhythmic glow of her skin, which flushed a soft violet as she spoke. "Power without conscience is not leadership," Zariah said, her voice captivating the room. "It is just an appetite. My father believed that fear was the only currency the galaxy respected. He built nightmares to buy security." She gestured to the viewport behind her, where the nebula swirled in silent majesty. "We are here to prove that knowledge is a stronger currency. The creatures we saved are not weapons. They are living history, and they deserve to exist without a trigger mechanism embedded in their brains." The applause was polite, but the respect in the room was palpable. Zariah had transitioned from a disgraced princess to the conscience of a generation. She was no longer the useless royal. She was the voice of the voiceless. Later that evening, the station powered down to its night cycle. The corridors quieted, leaving only the hum of the life support systems. Ren and Zariah returned to their private quarters on the habitation ring. It was a large suite, granted to them by the station administration in recognition of their work. The room was a testament to the merging of their two worlds. On one wall hung a vintage map of Earth's Amazon basin, tattered and framed in wood. On the opposite wall was a Calvarethian tapestry, woven from light threads that changed color with the ambient temperature. The shelves were cluttered with Ren's data books and Zaraya's collection of orbital crystals. In the center of the room, placed on a specialized thermal pedestal, sat the canister. The egg was no longer in stasis. It was resting in a warm, nutrient-rich incubation field. The shell, once a dull gray, was now translucent, swirling with inner shadows. It was protected by a dozen treaties and guarded by the station's most sophisticated security. But Ren and Zaraya kept it in their home. They were its guardians, appointed by fate. Ren threw his jacket over a chair and sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "Long day?" Zaraya asked. She was standing by the viewport, looking out at the nebula. She had changed into a loose robe, her feet bare on the metal floor. "Standard," Ren said, walking over to the small kitchenette. Two students tried to argue that the Vorax could be domesticated if raised with music. I had to explain that a carnivorous reptile does not appreciate opera. Zaraya chuckled, the sound warm and genuine. "It is a nice theory, though." Ren poured 2 glasses of water, no diamond dust, no synthetic whiskey, and walked over to her. He handed her a glass. "How was the delegation?" "Exhausting," Zaraya admitted, taking a sip. "They want me to run for a seat on the oversight committee. They think my name carries weight now." "Does it?" Zaraya looked at her reflection in the glass of the viewport. Her face was the same, but her eyes were different. The fear was gone. The uncertainty was gone. "It carries the weight I choose to give it," she said. "I told them I would consider it, but only if they agree to declare Calvareth 9 a protected sanctuary world. No mining, no military bases, just the jungle." Ren stood beside her, looking out at the stars. "You are saving your home. Even after they kicked you out, it is still my home. Ren, even if I can never go back." Ren reached out and took her hand. His fingers were rough, scarred from years of holding weapons, but his touch was gentle. "You have a home here," he said softly. Zaraya turned to him. The bioluminescence on her chest flared a soft, loving pink. She set her glass down on the sill and stepped into his space. "I know," she whispered. She reached up, tracing the line of his jaw, lingering on the scar that ran down his neck. "Do you miss it?" she asked. "The hunt? The adrenaline?" Ren looked at her. He thought about the mud, the blood, the constant state of hypervigilance that had defined his existence for 2 decades. He thought about the silence of the jungle before a kill. Then he looked at Zaraya. He saw the woman who had pulled him back from the edge of his own cynicism. He saw the peace they had carved out of chaos. "I miss the simplicity of it sometimes," Ren admitted. "In the jungle, you know who the enemy is. Here, in politics and the classrooms, it's harder to tell." He wrapped his arms around her waist, pulling her close. "But then I came home," he said, "and I realized that I don't need to hunt anymore. I found what I was looking for." "And what was that?" Zaraya teased gently, her vertical pupils widening. Ren kissed her forehead. "A reason to stop." They moved to the large, low bed in the corner of the room. It was covered in soft earth wool blankets and silk pillows from the Calvarethian trade routes. The intimacy between them had changed since the desperate, frantic encounters in the jungle. It was no longer a collision of survival instincts. It was slow. It was reverent. Zaraya let the robe slide from her shoulders. Her body was a map of their shared history. The scars from the ceremonial brands were still there, faint silver lines on her ribs, but they no longer looked like marks of shame. They looked like battle honors. Ren undressed slowly, his own scars exposed to the soft light of the room. He lay down beside her, pulling her into his arms. There was no urgency. They touched with the familiarity of lovers who knew every curve, every reaction. Zaraya's skin hummed against his, the bioelectric charge a pleasant tingle rather than a shock. She glowed with a deep, oceanic blue, the color of deep peace. Ren kissed the hollow of her throat, feeling the pulse of her light against his lips. He ran his hands down her back, soothing the muscles that had carried the weight of a kingdom. "You are glowing," he murmured against her skin. "I cannot help it," she whispered back, her fingers tangling in his hair. "My biology does not know how to lie. It tells you that I am safe, that I am happy." Ren propped himself up on one elbow, looking down at her. She was breathtaking. The alien contours of her face, the feline eyes, the opalescent skin, it was all foreign, yet it was the most familiar thing in his universe. "We made it, Zarya," he said, a note of wonder in his voice. "We actually made it." Zarya reached up, cupping his face with both hands. Her thumbs brushed his cheeks. "We did not just make it. Ren, we survived it. And now we get to live it." She pulled him down for a kiss. It was soft, lingering, tasting of promise. It was the kind of kiss that erased the memory of rainstorms and laser fire, replacing them with the quiet certainty of a future. They lay together in the afterglow, limbs entangled, the station spinning slowly in the void outside. The silence of the room was comfortable, filled only by their breathing and the faint hum of the incubator in the corner. Zarya curled against Ren's chest, her head resting in the crook of his shoulder. She traced invisible patterns on his skin with her fingertip. "Ren?" she asked, her voice drifting in the space between wakefulness and sleep. "Do you think the egg will be like the others?" she asked. "Do you think it will be violent?" Ren turned his head to look at the incubator. The shell was glowing faintly now, a soft internal rhythm that matched a heartbeat. "I think," Ren said thoughtfully, "that it will be whatever we teach it to be. It doesn't have a hive mind to corrupt it. It doesn't have a king to command it. It just has us." Zarya smiled against his skin. "That is a terrifying thought. A predator raised by a rogue princess and a retired hunter. It will probably be stubborn," Ren chuckled, "and it will definitely refuse to eat salad." Zarya laughed, the vibration running through Ren's chest. They fell silent again, watching the starlight filter through the nebula and wash the room in shades of violet. Ren tightened his arm around her, pulling her closer, anchoring her to him. He felt a profound sense of gratitude. He had spent his life studying extinction, studying things that were gone. Now, he was holding the future. Zarya shifted slightly, looking up at him. Her eyes were soft, shining with a love that transcended species and biology. "Can I call the human who hunted them?" she asked, the question echoing the very first night they had stood on the balcony under the twin moons. But the mystery was gone, replaced by a deep, abiding knowing. Ren looked down at her. He smiled, the expression reaching his eyes, erasing the years of hardness. "Only if I can call the alien who made me stop running." He kissed her again, a final seal on the night. They closed their eyes, drifting into sleep. Two broken creatures who had found their missing pieces in the wreckage of a war. Across the room, on the pedestal, the incubator hummed, fade to starlight. The egg moved. A hairline fracture appeared on the smooth surface of the shell. From within, a soft golden light began to pulse, brighter and stronger with every beat. It was about to hatch,